William, your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. Welcome to the College of Complexes, being held at Barbeck's Restaurant at 8949 Garland Road, Dallas, Texas. Gently embracing the east side of White Rock Lake. When I entered, I was greeted like coming home to Grandma's house, warm and friendly. When visiting the Barbeck's Restaurant, tell them you want your reservations for the next College of Complex class.
Well, welcome to the College of Complexes. This is our 206th meeting. That means we met 205 other times before we were here. We started in February of 2009. Actually, it started in Chicago in 1951 for the purpose of solving all the world's problems. They're still working at it. We put a different speaker on every week, a different subject, normally. And we put our speaker on, we give him an hour to make a presentation. And we have questions and answers, not speeches. Then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody in the audience gets a chance to respond to what the speaker had to say, for or against. But tonight we're doing a little different. Tonight we're going to do an open forum, 50 years later, the Kennedy assassination revisited in Dallas. So we're going to, everybody that's here that had something that they want to deliver to the rest of us as to where they were, what happened on that night. We invite you to come up here and one at a time and decide what you want to say. Afterwards, we'll have questions and answers. If I had everybody speak at once, nobody would remember what they wanted to ask, so we'll allow questions and answers after each speaker, but try to keep the questions to a minimum because we want to make sure everybody gets a chance to speak up here. So that's what we'll do tonight. Anyway, does anybody have any announcements? Now's the time for announcements. Any announcements? Anybody have? Come on up here, make them. She can come up here and make them. How you doing? Oh, thank you. Situation. Thank you. Put that in here. Marjorie has an announcement.
Okay, this Wednesday, November 20th at 5:30 p.m. there is going to be a protest at the Lancaster Walmart against poverty wages, sexual harassment, lack of benefits. And then on the 29th, which actually is Black Friday, at the same Walmart in Lancaster, also at 5:30, some people, including myself, will be committing civil disobedience. That's when you block a driveway and you get arrested on purpose to attract media attention to the issue.
Any more announcements? Anybody have any announcements? Any announcements? Oh, come on up here and make it. Jim has an announcement.
Yeah, just as I get a mouthful of chef salad. Excuse me, just got to get enough of it out of the way. I can talk without choking. Well, as Tom said, we're glad to see you all here tonight. I have a little bit of ring in my voice. Are you hearing that? Might need to pull the treble down a little bit. Anyway, we're glad to have you here tonight. We're enjoying being back in the intimate room at Barbeck's. We don't feel like we're out in the middle of a big giant cavern somewhere. And we appreciate the friendly service, and I just want to remind all of you to remember that when you leave the table tonight. You know, whether you just get a minimal amount of something to eat or you get the biggest item on the menu, please be generous with the server. They have to face the task of coming in here and serving a whole bunch of us at one time. We're not trickling in like customers out in the dining room, so we appreciate the challenge of that, and they handle it remarkably well. So thanks again for being here tonight. Our menu is going to be sort of an unknown because all of us are going to have recollections of that night. Our group is, I'll just say this in parting, our group has had quite a bit of attention over the period of time we've been meeting to the event of the Kennedy assassination. In fact, Hank Black, who just walked in, gave a presentation one night on that subject, as I recall. And we had a gentleman who was standing on the curb he was a commercial salesman with a customer just a few feet from the car when the shots rang over their head and hit the car. And he later retired and went to work up in the school book depository on the 5th floor in the exhibit area and worked up there for a number of years. So he was very interesting to hear. He brought that recording that came from the past, and they finally found it and played it back and learned some things from that in a video. We've had a couple of other people come and talk and discuss Warren report and some of the other investigations that have occurred since then. So we've really gotten a lot of information about what people have learned in studying the subject. Not many people would have thought, I don't believe, that 50 years would go by and we'd still be as interested in and focused on that subject. Some people are still into the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. And that happened in, what was it, 1866, 65 or 6, yeah. Right at the end of the Civil War, when we killed more people inside our own borders than have ever been killed in our outside wars. That was a horrible event in our history. The war is a lot more historical even than the assassination of Mr. Lincoln, which was terrible. But at any rate, we all have recollections. We've heard a lot of theories about what happened. The veracity and completeness of what we've been told. And like almost anything, the Warren report, I don't know if you know how that worked, but Warren was Earl Warren, who was the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. He was not some cowboy down in Gladewater that they hired to come and run the issue, you know. He was a pretty significant person. The #1 attorney in the United States at that time. Gerald Ford also served on the commission, who became president later on. I can't name them all off, I can just name those two. But it was significant. It didn't tell us everything. The Secret Service did not provide them all of the documents that they had in their own possession at the time. The commission was put into place and did its investigation. So there are some holes. I'm a personal friend with a fellow who was a 2nd or 3rd year police officer at the time. And he went over to the theater. He was there when Oswald was arrested. And the chief of police gave them a 3-ring binder that has copies of every picture and document that had anything to do with it, that they had accumulated. It's very difficult to look through. I've read it twice. It has some photographs most of us would not want to see. So I didn't plan what I've said, but I wanted to just sort of say those things as a preamble, I guess, to what we're going to say. Each of us remembers about where we were and what we heard that day, and perhaps what our reaction to it was. So please feel free to share with us. This is almost like a 50-year obituary, post-funeral funeral. You know, we don't plan on melting down and all crying at the table tonight. We've probably had our sadness on this issue. Not that we would belittle it by any means. It's a significant event. But enough time has gone by that perhaps we can talk about it, and halfway sensible manner and have an opportunity to hear what other folks saw, heard, and experienced that day in whatever part of the country they were in. I believe Tom was in New York City, weren't you? So come on up and fire us up.
Now I have a mouthful of food, but anyway. Excuse me, as far as announcements go, next week, for what it's worth, we have Jim Love. He's going to talk about the Tea Party, the good, the bad, the ugly, and beyond. Thought it'd be interesting. And it's on your sheet there. I don't want to bore you with putting you to sleep reading all this. But anyway, that's next week, so kind of remember that. So tonight, it'll be 50 years to the day JFK was shot and killed here in Dallas on November 22nd. The question is, where were you 50 years ago on this date? What can you tell us of this day, never to be forgotten? What was your reaction to the fateful day? Did it change your perspective of anything? For the man who asked not what our country could do for you, but what you could do for your country, what can and should we be doing going ahead? These are the questions we'll ask tonight, and each of you has a chance now to tell us what you remember 50 years ago, this date. So, who wants to be first? You want to be first, Jim? All right, Jim is first.
We're going to get my mouth full again.
Well, that's all right. You know, we're used to it.
It's always full of something, isn't it? Let's see. I was in my first semester of junior year of accounting degree out at the University of Texas at Arlington. My wife and I lived in East Dallas, a few blocks from where Ray lives, on Lindsley, a couple of blocks over from East Grand, in a nice little duplex. And my wife worked downtown at the Mercantile Bank and went to work at 7 in the morning, and so we'd get in the car, I'd drop her off at the bank in the morning and drive out to Arlington. I try to always book morning classes, and I did that semester. But I read the news, I knew the parade was coming through downtown, and I would probably have been coming through the triple underpass within several minutes at my normal drive time of when the procession came through and went by the school book depository. So as you can imagine, I took a different route home that day. So I went up Highway 157 to 183 there in the Mid-Cities area and came through Irving and back that way. I was driving along Highway 183 into Irving when the news came on the radio. It's amazing how those things, the events and your mind takes a picture snapshot of where you were and what you were doing. That's not how a physician would describe that, but that's the way it is to us. It's really a photograph of what was going on at the moment. It locks it into our memory. So I remember driving down the road and I heard that, and of course it was shocking to me. And I was glad I was not there in the physical presence of it. So I don't have any exotic memories about the event of the day. I will tell you just a couple of things about the aftermath of that. You know, living here in Dallas as a Dallas native, I knew there were some strange people in the community. It was not as large as the metro is now, but it was quite large, and people had moved here from everywhere, and they were just about of every political, sociological bent you could imagine. But I could not perceive anything like that happening in our city. It was a shock to me personally. First of all, that it had occurred, and it was a shock to me that it occurred in our city. Religiously, at the time that happened in the early 60s, our city was probably about as high in its participation in religious activities, membership and active participation in churches as any city in the United States. So we were a pretty religious, moral community as far as big cities went. So to think that someone who lived in our city could do a dirty deed like that, to me, was just incomprehensible. When I got out of college, I went to work for what became the biggest CPA firm in the United States, and I traveled all over the country. I worked in Tom and Susan's area in Chicago a lot, spent a lot of time in Chicago, and out on the West Coast, and up in the East Coast in Connecticut, different parts of the country. And this was rather sad to me. I found myself very quickly when someone would say, "Oh, your accent is different, where are you from?" After about 2 times, I never said Dallas again. I would say Richardson. We lived in the Richardson School District, although we lived in the city limits. We were in the Dallas metro area. But I could not even open my mouth in a lot of settings and say I was from Dallas without expecting a deluge of hateful, angry, nasty outpouring from someone's mouth. It was unfounded. I mean, I had nothing to do with that. Our city fathers didn't meet and plot to do it. It happened here. And there are all kinds of theories about why it happened, but I did experience some backlash from that, just from being a resident of the area. And that's just sort of human nature. You could say, well, that made me mad. But, really, I understood. I just shut the term off so it didn't provoke the eruption. There was no point in pushing the button and making the volcano erupt. And that, to me, was just sort of what it was like. So those are my 2 or 3 main recollections of the day. It was a sad day. I hated to see it. I was close. I was glad I didn't witness it. It didn't etch a horrible, awful vision in my brain. What I have seen has been on photographs and film clips and things like that. You can deal with that a little bit better. But being face to face, like that one speaker we've had come here who was standing on the curb only a few feet away, who saw it, I can't imagine the impact on his emotion that happened, and it all had an effect on us. To have been in office only, a couple of years, President Kennedy made a tremendous impact on our country. He dealt with the Cuban crisis. Tom was involved in that, and he'll probably say something about it because it spanned in that time period. I had several friends who were. So he did have a tremendous impact. He decreased our taxes. So some of us smiled even from a financial standpoint. He boosted the economy by reducing our federal income tax rate, or telling the Congress, which was all Democratic, that they should, and they did. So there were a number of things he did that had some impact outside of just being sociological. People had some apprehension about him being the first Roman Catholic president of the United States. Like, whoop-de-doo, we can't hardly imagine not putting anybody in office now, because that experiment certainly did not cause us any grief. So fine remembrances. Mine were all positive about him. They were sad about the event, and I was certainly sorry to see the pain that it caused a lot of people. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Who's next? There's got to be a next. Jan, come on up here. Jan Nixon's going to speak next. We got to get her up here, though. You got the floor.
Actually, when I got the invitation a week ago or so, when I saw this on the agenda, I actually typed out something, and so let me look at it now. and I brought something special along with me. Okay. I wasn't born in Texas, but got here as soon as I can, age 3. And at age 5, my mom gave me a little brownie camera, And I took a picture of my friend, my girlfriend, and she took one of me, and the one of me was blurry and off-center and terrible, and the one of her was clear, nice, centered. And I was encouraged to take pictures for all the family events and trips, and my dad was not Super 8, I think it was just 8mm at the time. So, but I soon learned a little bit about politics and who's who and what's what, when in grade school, they just couldn't get my name right, and I was called Jan Nixon. And to this day, I am still correcting, well, I just go ahead and say it makes it easy. Jan Naxon, N-A-X-O-N. So, let me backtrack a little bit because, okay, I met President Kennedy, he was president at the time, about this far away, okay? But not at the parade. Some of you may not know, he slipped into this city about a year before that fateful day. My mom took me to my dermatologist at Baylor Hospital area or building, and he was a real joker of a guy, so we did not believe him when he said that he had word that President Kennedy was coming to the hospital to visit someone. But just in case it was true, we decided, okay. He said, well, just go out and on the sidewalk and be near there where he's probably going to come in soon. Well, he was a really cool physician, and so we thought, okay, he must know what he's talking about. We were on a corner and only a handful of us, and the motorcade came by, and he slowly, and then he stopped, and oh, that wide grin, you'll never forget. You never forget these things when you meet somebody like that, or you're that close, and I was 12. Okay, so, now I was in Franklin Junior High, it was called, now they call the middle school, next to Hillcrest High School, on Hillcrest, Walnut Hill, that area, and okay, well, hold on. I want to maybe backtrack to something else. Okay, I'll get to that. Okay, so I was in Franklin and Hillcrest and Meadow, that's 8th and 9th grade. So I was in 8th grade, and in the honors class, we were the only classroom to have a television in our room. One of those stands, and we were taking a test, and we were watching the parade. And so we saw that there was some kind of skirmish and that announcement that Governor Connolly had been shot. So someone from our classroom went down to tell the principal, and he made an announcement over remember the squawk box? Okay? And I just kept taking the test. And then we were listening some more, and they announced that also President Kennedy had been shot. And someone went down to tell him this time, the principal made an announcement that everyone should gather in the auditorium. Well, I don't know why, but it was already 1:30 about when he was shot, right? Okay, so I hadn't eaten lunch yet, and I was a really, really scrawny kid then. And I was starving and about to faint, so I went to the cafeteria, and there were only 3 students, 1 teacher, gobbled it up, went into the auditorium. Now, if your parents came to pick you up, it was an excused absence. My parents were out of town in Colorado, and so I was stuck in school with the other half, the Republican kids. So my recollection is this, and I've heard this type of thing from others too, probably mostly North Dallas, and that we gathered and they were making announcements, and then when it came over the squawk box, that little thing, we're all staring at that little thing in the big auditorium, well, big, we thought it was big then, that the president had died, there was cheering. Yes, there was cheering. And I've talked to some other people this week because I've been to some other related events and down at the museum and stuff like that. So, but for the first time ever, another thought was put in my mind because someone said, well, maybe, or they had heard that, but that maybe they were cheering because the president's dead and they can leave school early. But I've never been under that impression. I just clearly heard them cheering as if they were happy he died. So, and it had reminded me of our next door neighbor kid, the cute little boy who had, our parents had him walk me to school the first day, 3 blocks away. We were the new kids, both of us, new houses, 1956. So he drove me to school, and he was always so popular. After that, I hardly could talk to him. But when I was 10 and it was the Nixon-Kennedy election time, I have some things in my diary about that. My diary. Does anyone remember these? This is actually light blue underneath, and then I decoupaged it with the little scrolly type things around there. Did anyone else have one of these? Okay, it's kind of interesting because also I kept some little things from the Dubac skating rink that you could put, a dime in and get some pictures. It's like the Andrews sisters and some people of my parents' ages. I don't know why they did that, but anyway, I'd rather have seen probably, whoever. All right, so I made some notes here. Dear Diary, guess who won the election? Some of this might be out of order. Guess who won the election? Kennedy. I was for Kennedy, and Kennedy won. Now our new president is Kennedy. I watched the election until about from 7 o'clock till 12 o'clock in the nighttime. Made that clear. Kennedy and Nixon were the men that were running for president. And remember that the next door neighbor kid, the cute one? Okay, I remember during the election, things were really, we all know what the climate was like in Dallas. Okay, we've all heard. And I was really a nerdy kid, and I was really hurt when I got this message, just this handwritten message from him: if you don't vote for Nixon, we'll kick you in the butt. Well, that was that. Okay. Now here's another. Dear Diary, today is election day. Told you it might be out of order. I hope that Kennedy will win because he is Democrat. I'm saying it exactly how I wrote it. I was a good student though. I'm going to watch and see what happens on TV tonight. I have my fingers crossed that Kennedy will beat Nixon. Everyone in my class is for Nixon except for Don Williams and me. Now, and that was at Green Hill at that time. No, was that before? Yeah, that was, no. Yeah, age 10, I was at Green Hill, that's right. And then I went to Franklin Public School. Okay. November 9th, Dear Diary, yay-hoo, Y-A-Y, yeah, dash H-O-O, apostrophe. I still do a lot of apostrophes. Kennedy won, 3 exclamation points, rather. Okay, I can't wait till he is inaugurated, and I think I spelled it right. Anyway, I was also some sort of a spelling bee champ, but that's that on that. That's enough of that. Okay, so the day of, I told you about the day of the parade. Oh, and I told you about the photography. Okay, and let's see. Oh, the thing about the photography was this. I was at the 6th floor museum to hear one of the authors, one of the people involved, his name is Julian Reed. He was in the motorcade and an aide to Governor Connolly. And so he was at the hospital and helping with Nellie and the press and all that. And so it was interesting hearing about this. But I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, it reminded me remember I told you I was a lifelong photographer. So I was in if you get down there, the gift shop is terrific. And I was just looking at everything, and I saw this book, and it said, the youngest photographer to witness, or the youngest photographer's photos, and the story of the youngest photographer. And she was exactly my age. She had the same story. She was with the camera, and I don't know, by then it wasn't a brownie, but she had the camera, and she and her father went, and he had the video camera, and they were able to catch some things and, have their moment of glory or whatever. And I'm going, wow, darn, I missed it. And my parents were out of town. When they came back, my dad said that, oh, for sure, you and I would have been standing there, and we would have been at that grassy knoll, and you would have been taking pictures, and I'd be taking my video and all that. But anyway, they did know the Zapruders. And I didn't know it because the Zapruder's daughter has a different name I just found out this week that the daughter is a certain friend of my mom's, but I didn't know her as a Zapruder. So I think that's kind of interesting when you know somebody before you know their claim to fame. So I think that's about it. I do encourage you to go on the website for the 6th Floor Museum and all these other places that have events listed this week, because there are all sorts of things. I mean, I saw Letters to Jackie at the Windspear. I mean, there are things all over. On Friday, I'm going to attempt to be downtown if I can't get in with the 5,000, because I didn't register early enough. there are these big screens around. I don't know. And around the Arts District? Because there's the Grassy Knoll is the 5,000 people. You have to have ticket pre-clearance. Some of the big screens down there, and of course, yeah, they can do all kinds. Okay, so we'll go down there. I'm going to go with Susan. Y'all want to meet some of us? We could walk over there, walk somewhere and see one of those. So, you know, they're already doing specials on TV and CN and all that, and let's all, you know, it's kind of nice reminiscing. I went into a store yesterday and picked up a magazine, and I must have spent half an hour just standing there near the checkout reading all about this and reminiscing. So it's a time in history, and we were part of it. How many in this room were actually in Dallas at the time? Almost everybody, I suppose. And no, more than half. Some people are. You really? How many were not? Oh, we're not. More. What did I miss? Okay. Well, anyway. Now, and when the fellow was talking about traveling around, I remember, you know, oh, you're from Dallas. Oh, you're from Dallas. Yeah, I kind of felt like I didn't want to say anymore, but I do remember when I was 18, I went to Israel, and someone seen me, and I thought, oh, I'll be real cute with this cowboy hat, and some man pointed at me and said, "You killed Kennedy." And I'm like, whoa. But, you know, that's okay. I'd rather have been here and experienced it all and know all about it and all that than not. Thank you.
Hold on, any questions of, do you have any questions? Anybody have any questions of her?
By the way, my dad knew Jack Ruby, but some of his friends knew him better. Like, he didn't testify before the Warren Commission. Well, I think we all know that it's more than one gunman, and it was definitely verified when I heard last night at Poor David's Pub. They had about 4 people talk for a while, and then I got up at the end and said a little bit like this. And so the main person was a doctor who was in the operating room, and he said that, yeah, what one went in and there, and one here, and then the one that came through here, he thinks was later, here, and then that's the one that came out here, and that's the one that did. Yeah, definitely more shooter. He thinks the bad one comes from the Grassy Knoll. And I told you more about it last night, this magazine, I think that there are 100 people who knew. 100 people were like killed, just killed left and right, you know, by probably people. So yeah, it's some sort of a conspiracy. To me, conspiracy is that a lot of people wanted him dead, and a lot of people just kind of did things to get it kind of going, and the circumstances kind of fell into place and made it happen. Let it happen with lack of security and things like that.
Okay, we're going to get to see someone there.
Very good. Okay, who wants to be next?
1, 2.
It's got to be a next.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, come on up here.
All right. They're going to get on top of the mic. You're going to really get on top.
All right. Okay, you're next.
I am.
You got 5 minutes.
You didn't tell anybody else that.
Well,
Hey, you like my feedback? I got something more for you besides my wisdom. I got some DVDs here. The History Channel made a wonderful squeaky. Can you get rid of that feedback? We don't even. I don't even need this thing. Just get rid of it. The History Channel. Can you get rid of the feedback? Or oh, he's doing it. I was wondering who got the warrant artist, the deaf musician, Jeff Salmon. Can you hear me now? You're in good hands. Okay. These are, the History Channel made a documentary about the Kennedy deal, and the assassination. It was 9 volumes, and the last 3 were censored. So here I got 7, 8, and 9. So you can pass them around, take them, pass them around, take one, and they're well made. It's the History Channel, you know, and it's all these people coming out with stuff that, yeah, you don't want that. You don't want to know that. It's stuff that it's not the Warren Report. So what else do I have? My wisdom. Oh, my little story, which I think is not too relevant. But I was in Philadelphia. I was 14, and I don't remember exactly the moment that I heard it. We were in school, and you know, by the end of the day, we knew that he was dead. It was like he was shot, then he was dead. It was probably through the loudspeaker, the overhead loudspeaker. They're having a little moment here, passing out the stuff. So, anyway, what I do remember, though, very clearly, was what happened afterwards. There was a lot of darkness, a lot of weird, incoherent emotion. It was darkness, it was anger, and it was, people were getting a really bad mood. And when I walked home, I was on a gymnastics team, so I walked home like 2 hours after everybody else. I had to walk on a bridge. The high school was in a black neighborhood, and I lived in a white neighborhood, and the high school was half and half. And I was walking over this bridge. It was about a mile long, you know, car bridge. It was going over like 20 railroad tracks and stuff. And all of a sudden, the rocks were raining down on me. Rocks that could kill me. And I'm walking by myself, and one of them hits me in the back, but it didn't really get me. It got my jacket. And I turned around, and I was so full of this emotion that I just charged the people that threw him. And there were a bunch of black kids. And it was such an unexpected reaction. I didn't expect that out of myself. They all ran away, but one. And it was just like this weird thing. We were standing off like, you know, and this one guy, he was like the chief, and he had honor. He wasn't going to run, you know, just one little white kid. And so just before we decided to kill each other, the police came by, and nothing happened. That kind of diffused the situation. We both got out of actually having to do anything except defend our honor, you know, 14-year-old boys. But that's what I remember, which is kind of irrelevant. Well, I think what's much more relevant is what I've learned recently. I'm lucky to have these DVDs. They're not widely available. Every year, for the last 4 years, I've gone to something called the Lancers Convention. In the Adolphus Hotel downtown, all the JFK conspiracy theorists go there. And I'm not one, but I'm a 911 conspiracy theorist. And I don't really subscribe to too many conspiracy theories, but if you don't subscribe to the official conspiracy theory, then you're a conspiracy theorist. So I'm using the jargon, the language. I object to it, though. Anyway, I give away 911 DVDs to these people once a year, and that's how we got these. Somebody got a hold of these things. So they you know, the History Channel had this series, and they showed these videos once, and then later on they made a box set and they sent it out, and these were withdrawn at the behest of LBJ. So anyway, to me the most relevant thing about JFK is what I've learned recently, and it seems like it's not like, oh, a lot of people hated him and this and that. There's actually some evidence that's a lot stronger than others. And what it boils down to, and why it's relevant, and why I'm talking today, is because our country's been taken over by the military-industrial complex, plus intelligence, and that was the coup. I was listening to this lady on the radio, Barbara Pease, P-E-A-S-E. She wrote a book, The Assassinations. And if you remember, it was JFK, RFK, MLK, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, on and on. They put a number on. And even back then, 14-year-old kid from Philadelphia, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know anything about this stuff. Then this weird Vietnam War, I didn't like that either, actually. I mean, you know, we just had Veterans Day and everybody's waving the flags, but we have to be careful. Whoever, you know, is occupying that office might be a traitor, might not be in our interest. And it looks like the people are pulling the strings now ever since they did that public assassination right in front of the next president, vice president, whether LBJ directly had anything to do with it. He knew he had to go with that war that was going to give him a lot of trouble, or he would be killed. They were killing people left and right. That was a public assassination for those who knew, a silly story for those who didn't. If you listen to Barbara P., it's real easy to listen to. She doesn't get real wild, but she made that book about the assassinations. From public records, there's certain things that we, not controversy, because the official record doesn't argue with it. Same like 911, if you bother with it. Lee Harvey Oswald had no gunshot residue on him. They had to produce a false positive on him. This is the record. They had to go to great lengths to produce a false positive. And he said, I didn't kill anybody. And they did find traces of nitrogen on his hands, but that's what happens when you touch a cardboard box. All day long, he's lifting cardboard boxes. So she wrote a book about that, and the other thing she said was that Earl Warren, who was a very highly regarded Chief Justice, was dragged into this. He didn't want to be in it, and it was better to be called the Allen Dulles Commission. Allen Dulles is the father of the CIA. So he actually ran that commission, and there's so much in common with the way things are still going on with 911 and other things like that. So that's the relevance to me. Thank you.
Okay, who's next? There's got to be a next.
I have a question, Tom. Does anybody have number 6? I mean, I missed it.
Number 6 in there? I didn't see it.
Also, does everybody know that on this Thursday night, at 7 o'clock, Jim Douglas was written a book about
Come on up here.
this Thursday night at Unity Church, I think it's 7 o'clock. You can get the tickets through Teatro Dallas. Jim Douglas, who has been a conspiracy theorist for some time, has written a book about the connection between MLK, RFK, Malcolm X, and JFK, is going to be speaking this Thursday night at the Unity Church. He may have even written another book along with the one about which I've heard, but it would be well worth anybody's time. I think the tickets are like $15. It's this Thursday night, and you can buy them through Teatro Dallas. You want to talk? I really don't have a lot to say about it. I will say a few words, but I don't have any strong. I mean, I was 22 years old. Grover and I had been married like about 3 or 4 months, and you know, I had grown up in Dallas. I was actually too young to vote in the Kennedy election, but at that time I would definitely have voted Republican. I remember waking up on the day after Kennedy was elected and seeing the headlines, and I thought, oh, this is really tragic. My father was an extremist for sure, and when we got the notice from my mother, who telephoned, she was working at Republic Bank at the time, and said the president has been shot. Crossed my mind, could my father have done this? Because he was constantly making crazy statements, like Kennedy should be shot or Earl Warren should be impeached. But by the time Kennedy was assassinated, I was definitely a Kennedy supporter. And I'm a Democrat today. I wouldn't even think of voting other than a straight Democratic ticket. But I grew up in the era here in Dallas. It was a hotbed of ultra-right-wingers. It was a sick society. And in fact, the one thing that makes me think of some credibility about Lee Harvey Oswald being at least one of the assassins, I don't know if it was proven, but he allegedly tried to kill General Edwin A. Walker, who was a real nutcase himself. So he kind of had a history of making extreme statements. Now, whether he was picked up, promoted by, he could well have been motivated or even paid off, but nobody seemed to ever find money, but motivated by somebody who was out to get Kennedy. But that day, of course, anybody who was here knows, and people are certainly aware, they ran, of course, the full-page Dallas Morning News showing him to be a criminal, wanted for treason. Dallas was full of the indignation convention. They would hold this ridiculous convention of ultra right-wingers, John Birchers, basically. It was a perfect setting for this kind of thing because there would have been plenty of sympathizers. And I have never believed the official report. I've always believed that it was some kind of conspiracy that probably it went all the way to the top and probably even possibly involved the City of Dallas Police Department, isolated individuals, not the City of Dallas as a whole. But you had to have people cooperating with this. I just never could believe, and I wouldn't know a specific person. I don't know that I believe that LBJ had anything to do with it, but I just don't think it was carried off by one lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald. And in fact, the FBI came to our house. Grover probably won't be able to get up here and say this, but after Kennedy was assassinated, they were combing the area. And we suspected some friends of ours who were very right-wing probably gave Grover's name and said, oh, he's a Marxist. And he was in business for himself as a CPA, and I had quit working for the City of Dallas, so I was at home when this man called around 10 o'clock. This was probably Monday or Tuesday after the assassination on Friday, and he was saying, is your husband there, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, but he'll be home for lunch. In that era, you were completely forthright, and he said, oh, well, that's fine, I'll call back. Well, before lunchtime came, there were two men on the porch who identified themselves as FBI agents. And of course, I let them come in. I really wasn't even particularly afraid. I didn't even know Grover. I'd only been married to him for about 3 months, and I'd known him less than 6 months. And they just said, when he came in, he'd been out on a call. There's a rumor that you knew Lee Harvey Oswald. And Grover, of course, denied it. He didn't know Lee Harvey Oswald. Of that, I was convinced. And they were very pleasant. They weren't at all accusatory. They just said they were visiting with thousands and thousands of people here. They were combing the area for anybody that could give them information. And that's the little bit I know about it. But over the years, I just don't believe the official story.
We got questions for the speaker?
Any questions of the speaker? Any questions? No. All right.
Can I ask one question?
Here, go ahead. Come on up here.
Why was Oswald's wife, excuse me, I just wanted to know, why was Oswald's wife not more interviewed and questioned, and that, because she would know, yeah.
It's been so many years, nobody would care. But, she had those two small children, and she probably had gone to a public health clinic. That's what I would presume. And this woman was an RN there. But the lady had interviewed her within just a few days. And we suspect that that's the couple who gave the FBI Grover's name. Now, they would have asked the same questions of Grover. Do you know anybody that might know anything about Lee Harvey Oswald? But Marina always was able to keep a low profile. And now they're saying that, she reared her children very quietly. She's really a person to be admired. And she never tried to capitalize apparently on this. And it must have been a terribly frightening situation. My gosh, here you are, an immigrant in the country. You probably don't speak English very well, and then to have your husband charged with the assassination of the president. Ooh. Scary.
Is there no one here who remembers what Dallas was like when Kennedy was assassinated? We had a district attorney that could say guilty or not guilty. He was never questioned. He has been proven to have set at least 20 people to prison that were innocent. Dallas was a pretty sorry place. That was a very sorry day for me. There were a lot of very, very strong Republicans that lived in Dallas. I worked in a place owned by one. I had just come back from lunch. I heard 3 people yell when they said Kennedy was assassinated. They said, "Hooray!" That's the kind of place Dallas was. There were 16 people that were pretty big in Dallas at that time that left and went to Las Vegas. That's where they are now. Most of them are dead now. But Dallas was not a very nice place in quite a few ways. It was ruled by half a dozen people. No one could question them. No one ever did. And to me, it is a very sad day to remember. Like she said, I was a Republican. I became a Democrat that day and have been a proud one ever since. Thank you very much. The money went to Las Vegas. Everything's coming out like criminal money in Dallas. We had 3 people that were very highly known criminals, and they left with no one knows how much money, but they moved to Las Vegas.
A brief step aside. Jim ordered a chef salad. He raked about half of it off into a plate and ate it. And I have an awesome serving of lettuce and tomato and turkey and ham and tomatoes. If anybody didn't eat or get enough to eat and would like to finish it off, I don't want to throw it away. Would you?
Yeah, let's go down to it in case she doesn't come back. I'm holding my fingers.
Okay, who's next? We gotta have a next. Is there a next? Al Holman. Albert Holman. Not Al, Albert. I gotta say the full name, Albert Holman.
I was an extremely shy kid when I went to a boarding school in St. Louis my freshman year. So I went to the back of the room in the English class, English 101, with Mary Kessler, the teacher, and I sat behind the biggest guy I could find so I could hide. And of course she called the roll and my name came up, Albert Holman, and she said, "Is it okay if we call you Al?" And I said, "Yes, go ahead." So for the next 8 years I was Al. And today at lunch, a friend who has always called me Albert called me Al twice, and so I brought, it's interesting that you did that again tonight. Anyway, I was in Paris, France in the fall of '63 when the assassination happened. I was on a street corner and the papers came out and everybody was just thunderstruck. And I spoke a little French, so I was talking to people. And I remember using the term mon président, my president. I had never thought in those terms about Kennedy, but being over there in a foreign country, you know, I was an American. I was the one who represented the country in that little group on the street corner. And that whole event has caused me to do an awful lot of thinking. I didn't like the fact that he was a Catholic because a lot of what we did, and our forefathers did, was to get away from all of that religious domination in Europe all during those centuries. And however, he did not kiss the Pope's ring when he met him. Obama bowed down to the king of what was that country? Saudi Arabia, yeah. Which to me was one of the biggest insults to this nation I've ever seen. When the Olympics were in London, our flag was the only one that did not bow to the Queen as they marched along. So the Kennedy assassination has changed my entire view of life in a lot of ways. That and other things that I have learned along the way, it is crystal clear to me that it was a very broad, deep conspiracy to kill him. Who didn't like him? In May of '63, he gave an address to a college here in the United States in which he stated that he had uncovered a plot to enslave the entire population of the United States and stated he was going to abolish the Federal Reserve System. Now, the Federal Reserve, for those of you who have not read The Creature from Jekyll Island, you've not done your homework, you failed that course so far in life. It is a conspiracy beyond anything that you can imagine. It is the way in which this world is being controlled. It's part of the international banking system. They loan money and charge interest, and the money is nothing. They create it on a computer entry. It's phony money. Kennedy ordered the Treasury to start printing Treasury notes. He was going to abolish the Federal Reserve. That alone was enough to get him killed. Secondly, well, I think I've mentioned before, I had access once to a copy of the manuals of the Board of Directors of the Federal Reserve System, which to me are top secret above nuclear secrets, frankly. And it stated clearly in there that the chairman of the Board of Directors of the Federal Reserve, in their manuals, is supreme in power over the President of the United States, the Congress of the United States, and the judicial branch of the United States. He is the dictator of the United States. And when you think a president appoints him, that is just BS to make you believe that Santa Claus still exists. It also stated in there that that organization, the Federal Reserve, largely supports the CIA financially. They've never been audited. They can put billions anywhere they want, and it's never, I mean, it's like money laundering. Nobody has any track of it. And if you're interested, currently a big issue is go to a website called LibyanWarTheTruth.com. The Moriartys, a couple who were there on the ground and saw the truth, realized that everything we have in our news media about Gaddafi and about Libya is 180 degrees the opposite. That man was wonderful for his country. They were extremely peaceful, the most prosperous nation in Africa. But he was setting up a currency that was gold-backed, the dinar, and he was getting all these African countries around him, behind him, using that currency. That's the death of the IMF and the World Bank and the Federal Reserve System, and that was the death of Gaddafi. The CIA, run by the Federal Reserve financially, paid and armed 250,000 Al-Qaeda, which was invented by the CIA to fight the Russians in Afghanistan, once in, never out, to invade that country. And it was not a revolution. You could never have gotten the Libyans to revolt. In any event, that's related because that's a current issue. In the 70s, I think it was, Geraldo Rivera had a program called Good Night America, and on one of the shows he announced that he was going to have a 2-night successive group of forensic scientists, and they were going to analyze everything about the Kennedy assassination. So I sat up with a friend to watch that. Now, the Zapruder film is going, we've all seen that 100 times. The first thing that I noticed watching that film was that coming out from right here, probably the upper part of Kennedy's neck, as the car was moving along, was like a little Christmas tree or cone of a white mist. And then it was gone in the wind, and Kennedy was clutching his throat. And it was at an angle going slightly up. And I bolted out of my chair and I said, "Did you see that? That first shot came from in front of him, and it came from below him. It had to come from the rain gutter drain opening." And, excuse me just a minute. They played that video twice that night, and my friend saw it the second time. And we got up, I picked her up in the morning, and we drove down there, and there were 2 storm sewer openings, and the second one was in the perfect position for that, the one closest to the overpass. And so I called up all kinds of friends and told them about it. The second night when they ran that film, it was an edited version, and that little white mist was not there the second night. Now tell me this is an accident, a coincidence, and so forth. I don't believe in coincidences. If you look at history and you believe in coincidences, then, you know, look for Santa Claus. Years later, when I was practicing law, I had finished with a client at the courthouse, and we were going out to lunch. And I told him this thing about the Geraldo Rivera show, and we were going down Elm Street, and I said, now, here's the first opening, and there is no second drain now. They concreted it over, and where the manhole cover was is now a street lamp. And I went back there at another time and got out of the car and walked all along there, and they made that new concrete look as old as the rest of the concrete. And if you do not believe the city of Dallas is not involved in the cover-up of the Kennedy assassination, you're back with Santa Claus again. Years later, I was playing soccer. I played soccer for like 34 years in the men's league, mostly here. And I played right wing, and the right half was a sergeant on the tax squad of the police department. So he and I interacted a lot. And we sat in the hot tub after games quite a lot. And so I told him about this, and he said, well, they told us at the police department that they removed that second drain to quell speculation that a shot could have come from there. BS. Now, let's get to Henry Wade. I had a case. I seem to have been a lightning rod for controversy here and there, but I had a case. I got a guy out of jail on a heroin charge, and he said, well, they planted it on me, and I said, well, I've heard that before, and he said, well, you'll see, and I did, and I'm not going to go into the whole thing. It'd take me 45 minutes to tell you the details. But it ended up that my life had been threatened by the narcotics division of the Dallas Police Department, who were trying to muscle the mafia out of heroin trade in Dallas County and take it over themselves. Verified by a friend who worked for a mafia-owned nightclub on Harry Hines, verified by an officer in the intelligence division of the police department. And there were city, state, and federal, it was 1978, city, state, and federal investigations going on simultaneously. And a federal official, a parole officer, called me up one day and said, you know, in my job, I'm able to go down and go through records at the police department, and I hear things. They've hired somebody to kill you. And he said, be very careful. He said, check the wiring on your car. Don't go out at night. Don't even go down the hall alone. So for the next few weeks, I lived on people's couches around town and did all of that. And then, quote unquote, word from higher up came down to drop the idea it was stupid. During that period of time, what I'm getting to is I went and I sat down with Henry Wade, and I explained all this. And I said, Mr. Wade, this man is innocent. And I know that you have, and I forget the man's name, he used to be a polygraph expert with the police department, and then he went out on his own. And I said, I know that you send a lot of people over to him because you trust him completely. And he said, yes, he's very good. He said, but and I said, the police department want to run a polygraph on my friend, and I know it's going to come out phony. And he said, well, let's let them do it first, and then we'll send it to my fellow. Well, it came out phony. They said he was guilty, you know. And so I went back to Henry Wade, and I explained that, and he said, I don't have a private polygraph company that I work with. And he said, and don't come and talk to me about this case anymore. You go to my subordinates. And chewing his tobacco with his spittoon about 5 feet over there, he goes like that. And, of course, the wall and the floor was always splattered up, and a woman came in every morning and mopped up after him. He was a disgusting SOB. Henry Wade was up to his ears in that whole thing. There was a huge get-together of, who was it? Yeah, at the Murchisons, that's right. Who were all those people? Ford was here. LBJ was here. Who was the FBI chief at the time? Hoover was here. Compromised by the mafia because he was a homosexual. It just goes on and on and on. And when you look at it, the OSS is the predecessor to the mafia, and that fits, the predecessor to the CIA. And when we invaded Sicily, planning to come up the boot of Italy, we needed organized resistance against Mussolini. So who was it? The Sicilian mafia. And they have been like this ever since. The mafia and the CIA, they are not ours, folks. They're our enemy. They are destroying freedom in this world. And we need to wake up, and we need to, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're about to lose our nation. And the big turning point was the assassination of Kennedy, because it was so open and so brutal, and it was intended to make a statement that would scare the hell out of other politicians. And it's like when 9/11 came. Paul Wellstone was a very respected senator of Minnesota. You darn right they did. He was the man in the Senate saying, let's be calm here. Let's not be emotional. Remember, I say every time I get up here, every bit of emotion necessarily alters your perception of reality. Emotions lead to lynch mobs. And that's why in all political things, you should get rid of the emotions as much as possible. Know your feelings, but put them aside and think logically and clearly, and particularly if yours or somebody else's life depends upon it. You'll survive or die in battle according to that. But where was I going with that? Oh yeah, Wellstone. Well, Wellstone was saying, let's not rush to war in Afghanistan when they wanted to do it. Because 9/11 was just the slap in the face to get us to go to war. And he was out on a flight in a King Air, which is as good as any airliner, with professional pilot and co-pilot, he and his wife and daughter. And the plane crashed on a landing, and they were all killed. And the word that went around in Washington after that was, well, don't get yourself well stoned. We have a lot of evil in our government. It is run by greed and lust for power. And that's why the only form of government that will survive and protect freedom in this world is what our founding fathers gave us. And we've given it away because we haven't stayed educated and we haven't stayed alert and active. And we need to do exactly what Iceland did. Flush out their entire government after their financial collapse. They said, hey, bankers, this is not our deal. This is your conspiracy. You know, this is not just a happening in the market. You did this. They flushed them out. They held elections and elected all new people in Iceland, and they started criminally prosecuting the bankers, which we need to do. Now Hungary has thrown all the Rothschild banking system out of their country, and Russia has done it too. They are more American to me than we are, because we still adhere to that fraudulent banking system that, you know, who was it? Meyer Amscher Rothschild back in the 1700s made the statement, give me control of the money of a country and I care not who writes its laws. That arrogant SOB. I mean, these people think that they have the right, like in Libya, NATO airplanes. These people were on the ground now, they saw this. NATO airplanes and American airplanes bombed and strafed the city of Tripoli. They bombed schools and hospitals and strafed civilians, men, women, children, and babies on the street. At the end of that war, out of 5 million population, 500,000 had been murdered, and Al-Qaeda had taken over, and another 2 million left the country, and all blacks were being murdered by Al-Qaeda, even though they were loyal citizens of Libya. In Libya, contrary to everything you've heard in the news in the United States of America, which is totally controlled by those bankers, in Libya, every woman had equal rights with men. None of them had to wear anything over their heads. They can drive their own cars, form their own companies, rise to the top of corporations. Everybody was prosperous. When a couple got married, they got over $30,000 from the government to start their lives out on. Gaddafi said, no member of my family will own a private home until all of the citizens own homes. His father died without owning a home, and he was living in a tent when they tried to kill him during the Reagan administration when they attacked the country, another criminal war exercise. And every time a couple had a baby, they got $1,000. Free medical treatment for anything, anywhere in the world. free education to any degree that you wanted to get anywhere in the world, room, board, tuition, air transportation, and spending money. And when it came to medical, family members went with you. That man was so loved by his people. I saw a video, you can probably see it on YouTube right now. He was driving in a little car with an open roof, waving like this, and people were just streaming from blocks around to come ecstatically wave at the man they loved so much. He wasn't a dictator. He was a moderator of the tribal leaders. That country is run by tribes. And he was the moderator who was able to bring them all together and stop their feuding and create a wonderful country out of Libya. They're very wealthy with their oil, and they were providing water to a lot of other countries. I mean, what I would have to, yeah, what I would have to say, pardon me?
All stolen from the Hunts.
Stolen from the Hunts. Well, from what he did to for his country, God bless him for doing that.
He was nice with the proceeds.
Yeah, he did wonders. Anyway, it was a large conspiracy. It's part of what's still going on today. If we don't wake up, there will be no freedom for our children. And if you look at the meaning of UN Agenda 21 and go to the YouTube, don't just read it because it's very benign, everything that the UN prints. Go look at what people say when they analyze it on YouTube. They intend to eliminate about 90% of the Earth's population to make it more sustainable. Look at the Georgia Guidestones on Wikipedia. It's all spelled out. Anyway.
All right, hold on. We got a road star speaker here. Questions for our speaker?
Getting back to the day of the assassination, I recently heard that LBJ's first official act, which I couldn't...
Forgot that.
You know about that? Because
Yes.
I didn't have time to check it out.
After the assassination that day, they put the casket in the airplane. They got on the airplane. Sarah T. Hughes, a federal court judge, swore him into office right there on the plane. And he's winking at somebody else in the airplane at that point. You know, he's happy about what's going on. LBJ was one of the most despicable human beings ever to walk this earth, in my opinion. But then the very first executive order was to call back those Treasury notes that Kennedy had printed.
You know how he was elected, don't you?
Kennedy?
No, LBJ.
Oh, probably from tombstones.
Tombstones.
Yeah.
Right.
I went to the COPA meeting years ago here, which is Committee on Public Assassinations. And they had, they're not going to stop. If they pass it on to their children and grandchildren, they're going to see an eventual revelation of what really happened with Kennedy. These people are not going to give up. They're writing new books all the time. But there was one guy who had researched LBJ and written a book on him, and he just said a few things, but that was one of the most despicable human beings. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and the doctor who did autopsy records on it. Use the mic.
Sorry, I'm being loud. Okay, where was I? Okay, last night, and I was hearing Dr. whatever. There were 3 doctors in the room when they had to pronounce him dead. Hello? Hello? All right. Hello, could you go? Okay. All right, so last night, there were one of the 3 doctors who attended to JFK at the end, just before the guy came and gave the last rites. Okay. Priest. The priest. What was I going to say? Okay, well, when he was speaking last night, there's some things, you know, we all know there's a lot of secrets that left Dallas that day, or some remain, and that certain things about what was really behind all of this, how it happened, is sealed, and that it will be available in 1929. I think, 1928.
2029.
Right, right. Oh, that's right. We are in the...
Well, on the 28th of this month, I don't know if I have her name right, but Judy Berry Eddy, who was Lee Harvey Oswald's girlfriend. She was a research doctor doing very innovative research down in New Orleans, and they met down there and fell in love. Both of them had very unhappy marriages. They were going to divorce and marry, and she wrote a book called Lee and Me, and she spent many years out of this country in hiding, and these other authors would see that her book got sold and get the money to her. But she stated clearly that Lee Harvey Oswald was an arch patriot. He had a week before told the FBI of a plot to kill Kennedy, I think in Chicago, and that was foiled by that. And according to her, if I'm remembering correctly from what these people said, she stated that Oswald was approached and told, you will take a job at the school book depository and you will be the patsy for this or we're going to murder your whole family. And these people do that kind of thing all the time. They do it all the time. Look how many, like it has already been brought out, how many witnesses have been murdered. This is not coincidence, people. They don't die like fleas.
You said a lot about the Federal Reserve, but they're buddies that are a little bit more exposed. You didn't say anything about Operation Northwoods. I think that's...
I'm not too familiar with that. Why don't you talk about that?
Operation Northwoods, everybody know about that? It's been recently revealed that there was a plot to blow up American airliners, kill civilians, kill college students with fake drone planes, really just like 911. It was on Kennedy's desk in 1965, and Kennedy didn't sign it. In fact, he fired the chief of staff, the highest military man in the country, Lemnitzer. I forget, he has a funny name, but Lemnitzer, you know, they wanted war. In other words, we had people that wanted wars. They wanted to fight Cuba. This was going to be blamed on Cubans. And if they couldn't fight Cubans, they wanted to fight the Russians, and then they settled for Vietnam. But right after he fired Lemnitzer, he got killed. Kennedy did. And it's not saying the Federal Reserve has nothing to do with it, or the Mafia has nothing to do with it, but he directly pissed off the worst rabid hawks that were taking over power in this country. The CIA was becoming rogue, and Kennedy was our last real president. He stood up for it. He stood for principles.
He was the last patriot president of the United States.
Yeah, since then, the presidents have seen that. That's their number one lesson. Here's grade one. See this motorcade? Here you go. You see his brother? Here you go. You know, so. Operation Northwoods was somebody put it in the wrong file, so when they destroyed all those records, somebody found it recently, and it's an official document. And the people who proposed it, instead of Kennedy going along with it, he fired them. Then he got killed.
Well, Kennedy also was in a meeting with members, I guess, the Joint Chiefs, the top military people, and they were saying, you know, we could have a war with Russia, a nuclear war, and 20 million Americans would be killed and probably 70 million Russians, but we would win and it would be over. And he stood up and left that meeting and verbally questioned whether those men had any humanity at all. He picked up the telephone and called Khrushchev, and prevented World War III. They wanted World War III over the Cuban Missile Crisis. Our military did. He prevented World War III, and they hated him for that. Now, the Mafia wanted their casinos back in Havana. And when the Bay of Pigs, he pulled back the air cover, that infuriated them. A lot of their people got killed. Good for them. You know, all that Mafia stuff is, and CIA, you can't make any difference in my mind between them. They're just infused, and I've heard this stated, I used to have a classmate who was in the FBI, there's a glass wall, and there are the patriotic people on one side and the mafiosi on the other side, even in the FBI. You know, Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative is irrelevant. These are issues that divide us. And they do it on emotions. What we need to see is what's going on. And like Hungary and Iceland and Russia have done, we need to flush out all of these bankers, that whole banking system. You cannot have a war without money. And the minute the money is pulled out, the war is over with. And we've got to get control of that and go back to a real currency that's not going to be inflated. Again, I've said this a dozen times. Thomas Jefferson stated that if we ever let a private bank take over control of our money through inflation and deflation and the corporate structure that will grow up around it, because they can fund any dominant company they want in any industry, they will steal all of the property from our descendants and leave them homeless in the land that we have founded. That man was from this time, and he time traveled back there to leave that message.
Do you know how far back this goes?
The banking system?
Uh-huh.
Well, I know that the Byzantine Empire had a gold coin, and all the countries around it used that coin, and that's why for 800 years it was totally successful. Yeah. And one king of the Byzantine Empire, they had 50-foot high walls. Nobody could invade that country, but he got fooled. An invading army broke up, and he sent his army out. They turned and killed him.
Eisenhower told us that as long as you think your freedom is free, you better look out for the military and the ones that furnish their supplies.
Military-industrial complex.
That they will do anything for money.
Greed and lust for power.
It
strips humanity out of the people. I've been too long here.
Okay, the next person would like to have a chance at the podium. Do we have a
Who
speaker?
wants to be next? There has to be a next.
Yes.
Trying to give everybody a chance here. Who wants to be next? Is there no next? There's got to be more. Nobody remembers? Ray, you want one?
I guess I will if I'm...
All right. Okay, come on up here. We'll let him talk.
When could John Gentry never not talk?
Yeah, well, this is John Gentry. You have 5 minutes.
That is, of course, the question. When could I never talk? JFK, it was a very bad day when he was killed. I was in grade school, and is this what we're talking about, Tom? Okay. And it really changed the whole face of the country. You know, I asked the rhetorical question, if someone were trying to off a president, why would they do it so publicly? And I think the answer is who was taking him out, and then who did the cover-up, and I'm pointing my finger at the bankers, the international bankers, because he was messing with the currency, and that will get you killed. Kill zone, a sniper looks at Dealey Plaza. Craig Roberts, when I interviewed him in 1997, was talking about writing this book, and on the back it says, not the CIA, not the Mafia, not the Cubans. Well, now we know the CIA was involved, but who were they actually working for? And the mob appears to have been involved. Well, what does he mean by that? What he cataloged in here was basically it's Eisenhower's military-industrial complex appeared to be the interested players. Kennedy was going to pull, he was going to basically pull us out of the amount we had been in Vietnam. We had a lot of advisors there at that time. He was basically canceling the Vietnam War. Johnson went ahead with it. The interesting thing that Craig Roberts said is that the order putting us into Vietnam was actually drafted November 21st by McGeorge Bundy for Lyndon Baines Johnson's signature. Kennedy hadn't even been killed yet. So if that tells you, I know there are people who placed Lyndon Johnson in kind of the catbird seat there on the assassination. But I think it's anyone who's president in this country really appears to just be a figurehead. They're taking orders from somebody. Lyndon Johnson was taking orders from somebody. Even if he had masterminded the assassination, he could not have masterminded the cover-up afterwards. That had that really took a cooperation of the major media. There were a lot of people involved in the cover-up, and then how many witnesses did we have wiped out after that? It was quite a lot of witnesses. Dorothy Kilgallen, anyone who really was probing. Gerald Ford might have been. No, I actually wanted to hear what you said, Gerald Ford.
Gerald Ford isn't said. I mean, look, so many people are guilty, whether they pull the trigger or not. People from all walks of life and all. You know, we're going round and round in circles, and so many people in so many organizations, and so many private and public and elected and business and war machine. So many people are responsible because they all spread and let it happen. As far as I can see, I mean, I kind of sometimes see the big pictures on things like this. And to me, yes, someone pulled the trigger, and maybe somebody set him up, and then somebody set them up, and yeah, it goes back all the way up, and it goes to this and that. And anyone who I think let it happen, or spread the word, or said that they wanted this, or became part of an inner group within, whether it was CIA or whatever, I think all responsible for creating the climate that made it happen. Does that sound?
Well, I don't really know.
And it had repercussions for people getting jobs, or whether they got one of those 100 people that got killed individually over the following years. Dan Rather.
I don't know. That wouldn't be exactly my.
Ford, etc.
That wouldn't exactly be my viewpoint on it. Again, Kennedy could have been killed privately. He could have, stumbled, falling, coming off of his plane. He could have, any number of things. The kind of public killing that we saw, which really affected the psyche of the nation, that was really something special. And Craig Roberts was a police sniper, but before that he was a Marine sniper in Vietnam. And he said he went up to the 6th floor depository window, looked out, and immediately knew that Oswald could not have taken that shot and could not have done that operation. And further than that, he also recounted that a team of the country's top snipers at Quantico attempted to recreate the conditions of the Kennedy assassination, and none of the country's top snipers could pull off what the Warren Commission said Oswald did. And did that with an almost non-functional rifle. The Mannlicher Carcano, as I understand, sold for something like $5 or less. It was just a very, very cheap rifle. The scope on the rifle, yeah, it's a mail-order rifle. The scope actually cost more than the rifle, and the scope was not sighted in. It was incorrectly sighted in. Everything about the whole thing is all wrong. And then again, you have a mob figure, Jack Ruby, who basically sacrifices his life to take Oswald out. Who was Ruby protecting, and why was he protecting someone? I mean, it all gets very, so Ruby had a boss somewhere, and I think that boss just told him, do whatever you've got to do and get this guy dead. Yes.
One little comment about Ruby. I was down at the little snack bar in the courthouse years ago, talking to another lawyer who was personal friends with the doctor who took care of Ruby in the hospital.
Yes.
And he told him, and that guy told me, so it's hearsay, that Ruby died of cancer in exactly the manner that animals injected with cancer would die of cancer.
Yeah, I've been suspicious of that. Jim Marrs gave a very good talk on the Kennedy assassination, and I have some copies if anyone desires to have one. We can talk about it later. Jim Mars danced at, was it the Crystal Club? Was that Ruby's club? He actually, when Jim Mars gave the presentation, he had a photo of the young Jim Mars Carousel Club. There we go, Carousel Club. And I think then Jim Mars was dancing with Crystal at the Carousel Club. And a picture of a young Jim Mars on stage, kicking it up with, kicking up his heels with this gal. So Jim Mars was right in the mix there, and he knew a lot of the players. It's a very interesting talk he gave. And again, I think Jim Mars' conclusion was some very powerful forces were behind who did the assassination. He gave a lot of evidence on that. And I would say, and this is just kind of a comment kind of from my own perspective. I guess I'm getting near the end of my 5 minutes if I get any credit for the interruptions. We've been basically under the power of a cartel since the time of the Kennedy assassination. It's not that we were in the clear beforehand. It's not that there were not criminal influences beforehand. But the criminal influences have been sitting in the positions of power in this country since that time. And you look at the events happening, General Ben Parton gave a talk in 1997, and it was called The Program of the Third International. Don't presume that that's always referring to communism when they talk about the Communist International, because the actual plan really was to consolidate into a world fascism, which we see happening around us right now if we have eyes to see. And back in 1997, General Benton K. Parton was stating that we were in what was referred to in the documents as the period of escalating violence. And this is a technique. It's a program by which, by means of false flags and sometimes even real events, a country is moved forward into tyranny. And every event we've had here recently has been another move into tyranny. I've been basically kind of moving out of this genre of, you might call the conspiratorial stuff. And I mean, I was ready to retire, you might say, just do normal video work. And then they did the ridiculous false flag operation called the Boston bombing, Boston Marathon bombing. And I'm watching bombs go off there, footage, TV footage, and I can tell, even as a layman, that the brisance, the speed of the explosions, that's fireworks. That's not an actual bomb doing damage there. And we were treated to Hollywood, promoted as if this was a real event. There may have been real people injured there. There may have even been some people killed there. But that was nothing about what it seemed. I mean, that was a well-orchestrated drill that the media promoted to us as being a real event. And actual people died as a result of being accused, being suspects in that. But the more I look at that, they've even discovered some of the canisters, the trash cans, if you will, that the explosions were coming from. And they're right there. You can see people kind of covertly hauling them out of the scene. They've got pictures of some of this stuff. Anyway, that got me back involved. And so now I'm out there doing more work, trying to investigate what this crazy government we have is trying to pull on us. And if you think that you're in a good position because perhaps your party is in, it ain't anybody's party who's in there right now. It's not Republican, Democrat. If you think that the people you elected are actually promoting anything for your welfare, I think you need to really look at things carefully. That's my own perspective. It's my opinion. We all have them. Thank you.
Can you give us a thumbnail of what fascism? what a fascist government would be?
Pardon me?
A fascist government. Just a thumbnail.
Fascism is basically an authoritarian government where the corporations are more in control than people are. And we saw a lot of this in Adolf Hitler, although you didn't, it hasn't really been laid out necessarily, but some of the main corporations there really survived the war, moved over here, and have a lot of power over here. So, you know, we have a continuing from Nazi Germany and the supposed purported victory there. We had Operation Paperclip, our moon program. The moon program, pursued by Werner von Braun, this is, you know, one of the top Nazis. A lot of these people received pardons to work in our government, in our defense.
All right, we have need another speaker.
Another speaker? Any more? Gotta be more. Oh, Ray is up. Ray, come on up here. You got the floor.
If you insist.
If I insist.
If you insist. Well, I'll just give my experience first. I'm not sure how many of you have told about your experience at the assassination, but I'll give you mine. I lived in Fort Worth, and I heard that Kennedy was going to be out at Carswell Air Force Base. And I didn't live too far from there, so my mother and I went out there. She thought we'd be able to see the president. And just one of my thoughts, you know, I just drove right into the gate at Carswell Air Force Base. And I thought, well, that's a shock. Every time I had been there, they had armed guards at that station. I'd had friends, I'd stop there at the guard station and let them out. They wouldn't let me in for love nor money. This time, when Kennedy was over there, it was wide open, and somehow that just left an impression with me. Another impression was there were so many people there. You really couldn't see the president or Jackie. I think I remember seeing that pink dress that she was wearing. If I looked real close and stood on my tiptoes and looked over the crowd, my mother was pretty short. I doubt if she ever saw either Jackie or the president. But then he was going to leave on this Air Force One. And I still remember I stayed around long enough to watch that plane go over. This is Carswell Air Force Base, the west side of Fort Worth. I thought, good grief, he's going to go, what, 45 miles to Love Field? And this monster jet, you know, that's just one of the little impressions I had. And I thought, well, you know, they had everything all cleared. He didn't get up very high. He might not have been 10,000 feet, and just flew over and landed. So I took Mother home. I had a class at UTA. Jim saying he had classes at UTA. Mine was the afternoon. So I just drove on over toward Arlington to school. I don't know why I do not remember exactly when I heard about the assassination. All I remember was that once I got to my class at UTA, there was no class. Everything was absolutely evacuated. Ordinarily a crowded classroom, there was one or two people and they were leaving. So I simply drove over and drove back. And that was my experience with that assassination. In regard to the impressions and some of the things that I was left with, and especially remembering Kennedy, of course the quote that he'll always be remembered for is ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And of course everybody just rallies behind that and thinks that it's absolutely wonderful, and it is. Are we doing that today? We are doing the exact opposite. We are saying whatever the government has got, I want some of it. I am going to get mine. It's an entitlement society. We are encouraging, we are promoting getting something from the government. This is not a giving culture we're in. We're in a taking culture. It is a me first. culture, and that is so sad. Nationwide health care, I don't think Kennedy would have done it. A Kennedy care, I don't see that. He also knew who our enemy was. He knew it was the Soviet Union. He knew we were on the very edge. There could be nuclear war. And yes, he did not kiss the ring of the Pope. And I believe he would not have bowed before a Saudi king. Do we know who our enemy is now? It's already been mentioned. He cut taxes. Kennedy wanted the American people who were working to keep more of their own hard-earned money. Is that reasonable? Is it reasonable to take all of it and funnel it to Washington to waste? Kennedy gets kudos there. The man on the moon, he wanted to see a man on the moon. I think when that was mentioned, a whole lot of people would have thought, he's lost it. A man on the moon? Is he crazy? It happened, didn't it? Sadly, he didn't get to see it. Well, we did have a man on the moon. He was urging a bright future for this country. He wanted this country to excel, to go forward. He wanted each American to be the best he could be. Is that what we're doing now? I don't think he would be recognizing this new normal. I don't think Kennedy would have put up with a new normal. He wanted this country to go forward in every way. I also don't think that he would recognize today's Democrat Party. Kennedy had a lot of pretty conservative ideas. I mean, knowing foreign policy and understanding the threat. He cut taxes, wanting the best for America. That doesn't sound like this Democrat Party of today. He understood, or I would think that if he saw this Democrat Party of today, he would not recognize it and he would not own it.
Questions for our speaker?
Any questions of the speaker? All right, we've got one question for the speaker.
Well, this is more of a comment, but Ray Eisenhower actually was proposing some form of national health care during his administration. He was trying to see that done, and I don't think Kennedy really would have opposed it. The problem is we have such an out-of-control, expensive medical system today, it's really unfeasible until you really just redo the whole system. I don't think either one of those presidents would have approved what we have going on now.
No, it isn't, John. We need to leave it alone. We don't need it. We do not need it, and we have turned it down several times. Hillary tried to come up with health care. Hillary's health care lasted days, and it was scrapped. And this one needs to be scrapped too. This is a disaster. Whatever problems we have in healthcare, a lot of those problems have been brought on by government intrusion in the first place. And to keep up what we've got is going to be ruinous. It has already proven to be ruinous. We do not want healthcare for me and for you to be controlled by these Washington elites who think they know a lot better than we do, who are going to control the doctors, who are going to control the hospitals, who will control the medicines. We don't want that.
And I'm in almost complete
we want private enterprise. And we want competition. Whenever, I'll get to that next.
Yeah. You don't have the talking stick at the moment, ma'am. And let me go ahead and answer Ray as far as what Ray was saying. Just a moment here, sir.
There are two questions, and I'll get to yours, sir, if you'll just relax, okay?
the nature of what
If you will
Eisenhower...
relax, please relax. Okay, just cool it. Can we cool it? We want competition in every aspect of it. If you go to a doctor and you don't get good service, you will go to another doctor that you believe gives you better service and maybe even cheaper prices. And the same way with the drugs. With every imaginable aspect of it, we want to have competition. That's what holds prices down. And if you go out to eat, you go where there is good value, where the prices are low and you get what you want. If you buy a car, if you buy a house, whatever you do, the more competition, that will moderate the prices. If the federal government does all of this, did you know what happens to competition? Yes, sir, I get my health care from Medicare. Yes, I do. The government does it. That is true. I did not have a choice. I'm glad for it. I will admit. I'm glad for it. I like it. I want it.
Ray, I think my comment on this...
Well, this could go on and on.
Yes, let me just respond to
have nationwide health care, sir, is not the same thing as what I'm getting. No.
I would tend to disagree with the yes it is folks, and here's the reason why. Hillary Care was a national ID system. This Obamacare is a national tracking system from hell. And it's all about controlling people. It's not about providing you the services that you think you're going to get, and if you believe that, fine. You're going to find out over the next few years what the reality of this program is, and on that I agree with Ray.
Well,
may I make a comment?
Okay.
I think what we need in this country is the re-emphasis of free enterprise. And that means, however, in this country that we need antitrust laws well enforced. And the large corporations that have created, like the pharmaceutical cartel, that provide a drug that costs them a penny and we pay $100 for it, and that's no exaggeration. I think those people need to be busted up legally, because they are cartels, and that is one of the strongest cartels on this planet, is the American pharmaceutical industry. And that's what's driving this whole thing right now into a socialistic system. And if you will get a copy of a video from John back here on Virginia Prodan, who was from Romania and watched that country go downhill with socialism until the people around Ceausescu and all of his corporate structure got wealthy and everybody else got very poor, you would see that socialism does not work. The only thing that will work is a republic form of government that we manage.
Preach it, brother.
Okay, any more speakers? Is there anybody else going to talk up here today? Anybody else want to give a... Yeah, I do, if I'm the last one standing, but I would see if there's anybody else. Come on up here.
It's hard, I mean, I've already, but some of the comments that people made about the Fed, which were all sound, remind me of another upcoming action. It's November 23rd, which is a Saturday, at 1 p.m. at Clyde Warren Park, just catty corner from the Federal Reserve, is going to be the 6th annual protest of the Federal Reserve. So thank you for the people who remind me of that. I didn't check my calendar before I came up to the podium, and I wanted to remind people of that while I had it fresh in my mind. Excuse me. As for me, I was only 6 months old. I'm told that my mother was in a rocking chair holding me when she heard the news. I still have that rocking chair in my apartment. And at the time, she was willing to give up her baby if it would bring the president back. She no longer feels that way. but she did at the time, and that's the story. I did grow up in the shadow of all this, and there were times when I and my other classmates in K through 12 school had to tell people when they asked us about the assassination, yeah, we got it, or I got out of the playpen and did it myself.
Wait, see, we get see those other speakers first. Any other speakers? The man in the corner, I think he wanted to talk. Want to get up here? Well, we'll let you up here. Well, come on up here.
Concerning health care, what are we to do with the 40 million people that don't have any health care? Are we to let them just fend for themselves and just die of a short death? I'm not hoping for it. I'm not hoping for it. I'm not hoping for it. I don't want to see that happen. Oh. Yeah. Well, are we to let the emergency rooms take care of us the rest of our lives? And then, are you prepared to pay for the taxes that involve the emergency rooms? Are you willing to pay all that?
It's been said that 30%, I have private insurance for years. That's what, I'm self-employed, it was what works, and it's fine. And it's been said that 30% of what I pay is going towards, for people who don't have any insurance. So just like we have to have, you know, some insurance, we drive a car, if we hurt somebody, that kind of thing. I think, you know, we're all gonna, we're in our bodies and we're all gonna get sick, die, whatever. So the principle of insurance is if we all put in something, and it's better for all of us, and it's been said by studies, and if there's anything I've learned from lobbying with nonprofits in Austin is that whenever we ask for money, and this is for health education and all these kinds of things, all these studies help to back up that for each dollar we're asking for now, it may take 3 or 5 years, but it'll pay for itself in the cost that we won't have as a result of people's lack of education or dropping out or ending up in prison or on the streets and crime and fighting and all the rest of it, if it's that way, or health. And so studies have been done already, and that's why it leaned this way. Let's clean it up. We know that there's so many people who couldn't get insurance, people who have been taken away from insurance and knocked off from their insurance, people who have pre-existing conditions. At least have them paying something, because otherwise they'll go, oh, I can just go to the emergency room. And then it perpetuates that cycle of the haves, the people who can afford to pay insurance, paying for those who can't. And so, but even if they, and depending, you know, and you get these tax breaks, you can still get insurance, and if you're under a certain amount, then you get a break, and even more if you're under the, and so, right, so, but at least we know, and they know where they can go, and they're set up on going to a clinic, for instance, for care, instead of running to the emergency room. And so the money, the stats, and all that has been run, and of course a lot of it's dependent on young, healthy people. But when you have half the people in this country just fighting and not helping the situation get better, I'm talking about another political party, the political party working against and trying to defund it, working against it for 3 years. Of course, look, just think how much better it would be on its way if we had the whole country working for this. It's just really hard for major change, any kind of major change, I've heard. And some people said there were a lot of problems when the prescription health, filling the donut, all that came, the Medicare D happened. So yeah, this is so new, and I just hate to see the whole thing, you know, people turning, and I think the media is also, because what gets people to watch is, hey, the news tonight, you know, so-and-so's ratings are down, and so is saying, accusing them of this, instead of being more honest about it and giving both sides and giving it honestly. And it's just like whatever sells. I mean, the media is selling us out too now. I really feel like it because it lines their pockets.
I worked in Chicago at probably the finest hospital on the south side of Chicago called Michael Reese Hospital. It was a hospital where, I am using the mic, where because Jewish doctors couldn't be on staff at Northwestern and different hospitals, they were at Michael Reese. And Michael Reese, the neighborhood changed and a lot of the Jewish families moved away and it became a very high crime area. And because it took in everybody, all the emergencies, the hospital went broke, and Humana came and bought it, and I started working in insurance for Humana. But there you go, when you don't have insurance, this is what happens to these fine hospitals. They're destroyed. And you can see what's happening at Parkland right now. So you are paying for it. And I just wanted to tell you, when Kennedy was killed, I was in the university and I was in my earth science class, which I hated. And there were some students were coming to class and they were on Michigan Avenue and they saw on TV the commotion and that Kennedy was shot, and they came running into the room and said the president was shot, and our professor said no one can leave, and everybody left. So I got on the train, the L, that's the one that's above the elevator, we call it the L, and the motormen were crying, and the police were crying, and the city stood still, and for 4 days, I don't know if this happened here in Dallas, they played like Requiem mass music. I mean, I didn't know, because I was in a big Irish Catholic city, and of course we hated Texas and Dallas in particular. And I remember about 2 weeks later, I was down by Rush Street, that's kind of like a nightclub-y area, and there were some men there, and they went, "Hi, you girls," and we asked, "Where are you from?" And they said, "Texas, Houston," and we just said, we just walked away. And I never thought I'd ever live here, because really, we did hate the city, for the right wing, like Kennedy called it, nutso, what did he say, nutso city? Nutville. Yeah, he told Jackie, let's show them some style. So anyways, it was a very, very traumatic and sad day. Now, Tom was in New York. Do you want to talk about, he was on the Cuban blockade.
Yeah.
Well, before that, but he was in Brooklyn.
I think the main thing that brought on the Kennedy assassination was that Lyndon Johnson realized he would never become president if he didn't do something to get Kennedy knocked off. I talked to one of Lyndon Johnson's former mistresses, and I asked her who planned the assassination. She said some oil man and Lyndon Johnson. And anyway, it was a real shock. I was Grinn's that had the apartment houses there near Kenwood and Lemon, and Shep Grinnan came in and said, "Let's go and watch the president go by." And I went down
Hold the
there.
mic a little closer. Hold the mic a little closer.
The president finally came by, and the car stopped right in front of me, and I noticed Kennedy kind of looked up and looked down the street, and when I found out that he'd been killed, I believe he suspected something. A few years later, I read a quote that Kennedy said to his wife the night before he was assassinated. He told his wife, said, "What can I do about it if someone chooses to shoot me from some window?" But anyway, definitely suspected.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, this always seems to get cast into a partisan, as if this is a partisan debate. One of the tapes I have here is, or DVDs, is of a talk given by Congressman Jim Traficant. Does anyone remember Traficant? He was a pretty phenomenal Democrat, and he was fighting for the people on a lot of different causes. And especially his great sin that Traficant committed was he got the 1998 IRS Accountability Act passed. I don't know if that's the correct name for it. And they were after him from that point and got him brought up on some charges, all BS. And I mean, he talks about it in here. But he was coming out with a new book in Cincinnati. I traveled to Cincinnati, videotaped Traficant giving the talk. And it's available here with my collection. So again, this is about tyranny versus we the people. I want to try to emphasize that for everyone. My problem with Obamacare is it is tyranny. And I think you will find out that it is not at all what it's represented to be, and this you may find out over the next few years. It may not be immediate. It's when I don't have a choice. It's when I no longer can say, I would prefer not to. I would prefer not to do Obamacare. I don't have a choice now. I'm into alternative health. I have friends. One of my friends was Daniel Haley. Daniel Haley wrote a book called Politics in Medicine. Politics and Healing. Sorry. I think there are millions out there who feel that way. Absolutely. Alternative medicine. I'm talking about millions. I just talked to an oncologist. I talked to an oncologist Okay. Yeah, the comments are being lost, and the thing of it is, if they can't afford to eat, we need to put people to work so they can eat, and then they can afford things. Yeah, you're presuming I'm a Republican. Okay. Yes. Jim Traficant, available here. And Jim Mars, yeah. Okay.
All right. We're running out of time, just so you know. So I'm the last speaker. I'll say a few things. Excuse me. I was in New York when this happened. I was in the U.S. Navy. I was on the Cuban blockade during the Cuban crisis when Kennedy pushed that, and we were watching all the Russian ships go in and out, and making sure they didn't carry missiles, and only if they were carrying them out was not a problem, but not going in. And we ended up in New York City, and we went through a hurricane, and the ship we lost all the lifeboats. They were destroyed, and there was a split in the seam in the forward hold, and it flooded. So we ended up going to Brooklyn Navy Yard, and we were in dry dock. And because we were in dry dock, I was in New York City, and that was when Kennedy got shot. And I saw the thing was up on right at Times Square on the board there. It said the president had been shot, and everybody was quiet. I went and saw Gene Krupa that day. He was playing the drums right there in New York City. Very quiet. There was nobody in there, and it was like a ghost town, New York City. People just disappeared. Anyway, I remember that. And it's just one of those memories you have, and you never forget it. And I did not know he was dead until later on, when I got back to the ship, and then I heard that he had died. So it was not a good thing. But as far as different things that happened on healthcare, we have the best system. I guess single payer would have been the best, but we didn't get that because we couldn't get it through. And now we have the same thing that essentially we're trying to get pretty much what the Swiss system has, where everybody buys insurance. And of course, that enriches the insurance companies where otherwise it wouldn't. Under Medicare, they only get about, what is the percentage they get? 6% that they get of Medicare, and the rest is direct government payments. So the insurance companies are involved heavily now. But it's still better than no insurance at all. And I think that once it gets through, people will see this. And in addition, in the long run, I think it's cheaper than the other way. It's cheaper than paying for 40 million people not having insurance. That's ridiculous. And so we'll have a society that actually works. That's what we're working for. That's what I think needs to happen. So anyway, as far as Kennedy is concerned, as far as all the different things, I was down at the grassy knoll yesterday and saw a man that he was selling different things. He gave me I've got it here. It was a book, and I got a tape. We watched it last night. But his view was that he was shot from different angles. Therefore, there was more than one shooter, and therefore there were people up on top of the grassy knoll behind it, where the fence was there. And he thinks that shots were taken from that direction. So in other words, it was not just one person. It was a conspiracy to kill the president. And the Warren Commission didn't cover that, didn't look at that. And if you analyze the Warren Commission, you'll see that everybody on the Warren Commission, a lot of them were Kennedy haters. They were not for Kennedy. And so they might have something to do with why their decision came out the way it was. But it was kind of glossed over. I think history will prove it out one way or another down the road. But the best we can do now is do the right thing ahead. Try to listen to try to work a good government, try to do the right thing, try to get away from we have the best Congress money can buy right now. That's one of our problems. And we have to change that. That's probably the biggest thing we have, because the corporations actually control Congress. And that's what fascism is, by the way. Corporations control of Congress. And if you want to change that, you got to get the money out of Congress. You got to get the money out of elections. And it has to appeal to the congressman itself. That's why I was in favor of Congress acting to eliminate, I forget the words, acting to try to get I'm losing it here. Wait a minute. No. Well, trying to get the not campaign contributions. Trying to get the media to provide sufficient free airtime for federal candidates in general elections to air their views. That way, a challenger could beat an incumbent. They can't do it today. There's no money in it. There's no money for a challenger. It's not in the cards at all. So if a challenger could be an incumbent, then the incumbent would start representing the district he's from instead of representing the people buying his vote in Washington. If you could do that, you could change the world. You could change this country. You could make it more democratic, and that's what I'm for. Anyway, I'll shut up.
Gotta catch a bus.
This meeting is closed. This is William, your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like us, or follow us, and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call. So when visiting the Bar Beck's restaurant, tell them you want your reservation to the next College of Complex class.